Good morning, you three. Hope you're having a good morning so far. It's Tuesday, the 26th of January, and I'm going to talk you through your RE lesson this morning. So we are carrying on with Revelation, and we are focusing again on the story of Samuel. So your WOLT for today is to explain the story of Samuel with reasons. So we're spending another lesson really unpicking what the story of Samuel means and what we can learn from it. So if you'd like to pause the video and write today's date and WOLT, and then we will move on. So just like normal at the start of our RE lesson, we're just going to take a moment to breathe, be still, be with God. And one way we're going to do that is by watching a short video. Now this video is the Song of Samuel, so hopefully it will allow you to take a moment to be still, but also help you with today's lesson and hopefully help you remember everything we learnt last week about what happened to Samuel. So I'm going to stop sharing this screen and hopefully share the video with you. Hopefully you enjoyed that video and that just helped you remember some of the key points from the Samuel story. So I'm just going to put myself back on the screen. There we are. So today we are focusing on the same assessment bullet points as last week. I can accurately retell the story of Samuel and explain its meaning. So today we're focusing on meaning a little bit more, and you are going to unpick the story and think about some tricky questions in today's lesson. So on the board, I have got some images. Now, these images are in order, and we know order is really important when remembering and telling a story. So I'm hoping that using these images, you can retell the story of Samuel yourself. So it's a little bit of a recap of learning from last week. What can you remember about the story? So if you'd like to pause the video, and hopefully there's someone in the room that you can retell the story to, or just retell it to yourself. Okay, so have a go at that and then come back. Hopefully you enjoyed that and the pictures helped you to retell the main part. So I'm just going to quickly retell it myself, see how much I can remember from the story. So I think this first picture here is when Samuel's mum asked God to help her have a baby. She really wanted a child, and she told God that she would offer her child as a servant if she was able to have a baby. So I think that's the first part of the story. Then in this picture, the mother is taking Samuel to the temple to be a servant to Eli. And we learnt that Eli was a priest, and that actually by going to the temple to become Eli's servant, Samuel would also get a good education as well. So it was really important to him. In this picture, I think this is the first time that God called Samuel. And if you remember, Samuel didn't realize that it was God revealing himself to Samuel. He thought that it was Eli calling him. So he quickly ran into Eli to find out what he wanted and if he could help him. And Eli said that it wasn't him that had called and that he should go back to sleep. He should go back to bed. And that happened again. So he heard God's voice, but he assumed that it was Eli. So he went to Eli, and Eli said, "It wasn't me, go back to bed." And it was only on the third time that God called Samuel. And remember, he called Samuel by name, because that's also important, isn't it? We learned right at the start of year 3 how important our names are, and the fact that God calls us each by name. We are all important to him, and he wants us all to do a job and to carry on his work. So actually, by calling Samuel by name, that's really important. He wanted Samuel. It was Samuel that was important to him, and he was calling Samuel to listen and to hear him. So it was only on that third time when he went to Eli that Eli realized it was God that was calling Samuel, and he told him what to say. And then when God called for the last time, Samuel was ready, and he told God that he was his servant and he was listening. So hopefully you also remembered those key points from the story. So last lesson, you completed an affinity diagram, and it was lovely to see some of those being sent into Class Dojo. So well done. They were really detailed. And if you remember, I put a few pointers, a few things just to help you on that affinity diagram. So we thought about what was done, so the actions, what happened in the story. And the main things that happened were the fact that God revealed himself to Samuel 3 times, the fact that Samuel was not ready to hear God until Eli helped him. So Eli helped Samuel to hear God's call. We also thought about what was said, and I think the most important thing that was said was speak, your servant is listening, because that showed that Samuel was ready to hear God's call. And actually, the fact that God called Samuel by name is also really important, and I expect some of you included that on your affinity diagrams. Then we looked at personal qualities. So we said that Eli was a priest and Samuel was a servant, but then we also thought a bit deeper about what that told us about those people. So the fact that Samuel was eventually ready to hear and listen to God, and the fact that he needed Eli's help to be able to properly hear him and to be ready to let God into his life. Then we thought about some questions that we might have. So did Samuel continue to serve Eli? Why couldn't Samuel hear God at the beginning? And how did Eli know it was God calling? And hopefully, although you asked those questions, you also thought about what the answers could be as well. So for instance, how did Eli know it was God calling? Well, we know that Eli was a priest. We know that he had a strong relationship with God. So perhaps it was easier for him to hear God because God was already such a big part of Eli's life. So today we're moving on to think about the story a little bit more deeply. So your task for today is to answer the following questions. You've got 4 questions to answer. The first question is, why do you think Samuel didn't recognize God? The second question, why do you think Eli eventually recognized that God was calling Samuel? Third question, what did Eli tell Samuel to say? Why are these words important? And then the last question, do you think God still calls people to follow him today? And if so, how? And that question is really important because it leads us on to our next RE lesson, tomorrow's lesson. So I thought we'd just have a look at the first question together. There aren't really any right or wrong answers. This is you thinking more deeply about the story and you coming up with your own meaning. But I thought it might just help if I model how you possibly might respond to one of the questions. So the first question, why do you think Samuel didn't recognize God? So you would then write a response into your exercise book. So I think we should be writing in 4 sentences. So I'm going to write Samuel. Oh, we don't want number 2, do we? Oh, I think it's just going to do that. Never mind. You know, it's just my response. Samuel didn't recognize God because. So maybe just for 30 seconds, tell somebody next to you or think yourself about why Samuel didn't recognize God. Samuel didn't recognize God because. So I think Samuel didn't recognize God because he was not ready to hear, God. I don't think he was ready. He needed help to really listen, and that's why it's so important sometimes to take the time to be still. So he needed help to really listen and let God into his life. And I might put it was Eli who helped Samuel. I also think it was more logical, so it made more sense for Samuel to think it was Eli calling him. Okay, because actually it does make more sense for it to be Eli. It was only when he had a little bit of help and he really listened that he was able to recognize that it was actually God. So why do you think Samuel didn't recognize God? My response is Samuel didn't recognize God because he was not ready to hear God. He needed help to really listen and let God into his life. It was Eli who helped Samuel, and it might be it was Eli who helped Samuel to hear God. It was more logical for Samuel to think it was Eli calling him. You might even add, as Samuel had not heard God's voice before. So that would be a response to question 1. It's not necessarily the right response. You might want to put something different, but that's the type of response that I'm after from you today. So answering in full sentences and really thinking about those questions. Okay, so hopefully that's helped you think about what you might put in today's lesson. So you're going to answer all 4 of those questions in your book as detailed as you can. Okay, I have put some answers on your Class Dojo post. Again, they're not necessarily the right answers, but it's a possible response. So if you are struggling, then you could always have a look at those answers, or you could discuss those answers with somebody at home, and hopefully that will help you. So if you have any questions, as always, please just message on Class Dojo. I hope you've enjoyed the lesson, and I wish you luck in answering those questions and really thinking more deeply about the story of Samuel. Enjoy the rest of the day.